Alright, y'all, so I don't know if this is just me, but I remember when I was younger, at least a few years ago, there would always be constant discussions and debates about who had the best backcourt in the NBA, and I maybe feel like this question might have gone away just due to the fact that we had Curry and Klay Thompson out in Golden State for so many years in a row that it was just a consensus. It was them, they were two of the all-time greats in terms of shooting and scoring the basketball and just changing the game. So it makes sense that they would hold the title for all the years that they played together. But now, with the news of Klay Thompson being injured for the season yet again, and the fact that we just recently had a trade involving two of the better point guards in the league, I thought it'd be fun to revisit this idea, this question of who has the best backcourt in the NBA. And yeah, I saw this somewhere that there's a question brought up of is Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal now the best backcourt in the NBA. So I went through all the teams. I came up with some other ideas that could potentially be it, and I just love to hear your guys' opinions on each of these duos that I'm going to be talking about. So obviously, starting with the names I've already mentioned, we have Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal out in Washington as a backcourt. Russell Westbrook, former MVP, triple-double threat, all that stuff. Even if he is not as good as he quite used to be, he is still an elite level player. Made the All-NBA team last season. Pairing that with Bradley Beal, who even though he's been snubbed from the All-Star team and All-NBA teams in the past couple of years, he still is capable of averaging 30 points a night and just being a walking bucket. So without even thinking of any other teams, you might think that's a pretty strong duo to have. A former MVP and still maybe top 20-ish player in the league. Compare that with Bradley Beal, who also could be a top 25-ish player in the league, and that in itself is just a great duo to have. There's some other duos that are obviously better in the league, like we see LeBron and AD, Kawhi and PG, but those guys are forwards. We're only looking at backcourts here. So to get into some of their competition, funny enough, one duo that I came up with was the other side of that trade, in being the Houston Rockets, who now have John Wall and James Harden. Obviously, James Harden has averaged 34 points per game for the past two seasons. He's also a former MVP, so that definitely gives him an edge in terms of this conversation. Now, the other side of this is that John Wall, we don't quite know where he's at. We don't know what type of player he's still going to be. But if we do somehow get the old John Wall back, John Wall was an All-NBA player, double-double machine in terms of assists and all that good stuff. So I mean, if we had that same healthy John Wall, I think that they would definitely be giving a good run to Westbrook and Beal for their money. But being the fact that John Wall is coming off the Achilles injury, I think that definitely would take them down a tier. In my opinion, I think I still hold Westbrook and Beal over the duo of Wall and Harden. Another new duo that was formed this offseason out in Phoenix was the addition of Chris Paul to a backcourt that already had Devin Booker in it. Now, this one is a bit more, perspective-wise, because Devin Booker hasn't quite made his name known in the terms of MVP discussion or All-NBA teams, but I could easily see this being his breakout year, the year where he finally turns a corner and has his name thrown into those discussions. And, we also bring on Chris Paul, who just last season was getting MVP talks and discussion and a share of the votes. Even though he is up there in age, Chris Paul is still a very effective player. He's a team leader. Again, we saw what he did in Oklahoma City, dragging that young squad into the playoffs and almost beating the Houston Rockets in a 7-game series. It led all up to a buzzer beater that could have gone in had the Thunder maybe run a better play, but that's for a different topic. Either way, Chris Paul is still a very elite player. Devin Booker's on the rise, and I think just because of that, in my opinion, you guys might have differing opinions, but in my opinion, the fact that Chris Paul is a bit up there in age compared to most of the guys on this list, and the fact that Devin Booker isn't quite there yet, I think the edge might still be towards Westbrook and Beal, but we still have plenty of duos to go and backcourts to look at, so no fretting yet if you hope that the best backcourt in the league isn't Westbrook and Beal. There's still plenty of other options to go with, so I guess we'll just move on. Next up, we're going to Utah for this backcourt, and that is Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell. Now, similar to the Phoenix backcourt and Chris Paul and Devin Booker, Mike Conley is on the back half of his career. He's definitely on the decline from his peak and where he once was in this league. And again, Donovan Mitchell is in a similar state to Devin Booker, in that he's not quite at his peak yet. He's still on the rise. We still have plenty more to see from Donovan Mitchell. But from what we've seen so far, I think there's definitely a case to be made that Donovan Mitchell could be in MVP discussions a few years down the line, similar to what we think about Devin Booker. And while I am a fan of Donovan Mitchell, and I think his game could definitely improve at a very high rate over these next couple of seasons, I think Mike Conley is definitely dragging down this duo in terms of overall talent and, just skill. Because Mike Conley, like I said, he's already on the decline. He didn't have a great season last season. I know he missed some time. He left the bubble for a little bit. I forget if it was COVID related or if he was just having a kid. I think he was having a kid, but he might have also had COVID related issues. But either way, Conley had some ups and downs, and I think that's only going to be a precedent for these future seasons. I think these ups and downs are going to get a bit more frequent, and while Mike Conley is definitely still a serviceable starting point guard, he's just not quite at the same level as some of the other point guards and just guards in general on this backcourt list. So with that being said, again, in my opinion, I just don't think this Jazz duo is quite at the levels of any of the other duos, to really be honest. I'd probably definitely behind Westbrook and Beal, definitely behind definitely behind Wall and Harden, just because Harden already has such a good, he's in his prime right now, MVP caliber player. Definitely behind Paul and Booker, because they're basically just a poor man's Chris Paul and Devin Booker. And yeah, so far I got them at the bottom, but we got one other duo to talk about, and I think they could definitely give a run for Westbrook and Beal's money at the top of this list. And that duo I'm talking about is out in Portland, and it's one that has actually been together for a while now. I believe that they are the longest tenured duo in this list, just in terms of playing together in the same backcourt, and that is Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. Obviously, Damian Lillard has been an All-NBA level player for quite some time now. I think he's officially going to start getting some MVP talks, which to me is crazy because Damian Lillard has been playing at such a high level for so long now. The fact that he's never really been in an MVP discussion before, I understand that his team has never really won games in the past, but again, Damian Lillard's a special player. He's approaching the back half of his prime years right now, so he still has plenty enough to the tank, but he is, you could maybe say that the start of the decline is coming. And as for CJ, he maybe doesn't have the star power as a few of the other guys on this list, and probably won't ever be seeing any MVP, candidacies or maybe even all-star games in his future. But CJ McCollum is still an absolute bucket. He can go out and give you 30 points any given night, and he's a good complement to Damian Lillard, as he's also a pretty good on-ball defender. This duo, even though, like I said, the team hasn't necessarily won many games in the past, this is still a very much feared duo. They've been doing it for a long time now. They're deadly. They absolutely expose opposing backcourts that have no defense. And again, this is just an insanely good duo. And I think they could give a run for Westbrook and Beal's money in terms of being the best backcourt in the NBA. But again, we might have to see how the season actually develops and unfolds. So outside of these 5 duos, and obviously excluding the Curry-Clay backcourt because Clay is not going to be playing this season, there wasn't really many other teams out there who had anywhere close to a backcourt as strong as these. So again, quickly, if you guys want to leave your comments down below on your favorite backcourts or who you think is the best backcourt. Now that I have my 5 named, 5 candidates, I'll go down and list them now. So I think Westbrook and Beal do snag that top spot, as long as I believe in the Westbrook resurgence season. I think he's going to come out and could easily give us, 25, 7, and 7 averages across the entire season. And Beal will also probably come out and drop, high 20s to 30 points a night. So I think they still take the top spot. After that, I think I'd go Dame and CJ. And then closely behind them at third is Wall and Harden. After that, I'd go Chris Paul, Devin Booker. And then a significantly gap farther down, I have Conley and Mitchell, which, no slight on them, but they're just not at the same tier as some of these other duos. But yeah, that'll do it for this video. Again, I just thought this is kind of a fun concept and one that I haven't looked at in a while, and because of the fact that Curry and Clay have just reigned supreme for so long. But again, now that Clay's out, there's actually, I feel like, a discussion that can be had around this concept of who has the best backcourt. And so, again, I'd be curious to see your guys' opinions down below in the comments about who you think has the best backcourt in the NBA currently for this upcoming season. And while you're down there, maybe think about hitting the like button if you enjoyed this video or enjoy this type of content. And other than that, as always, most importantly, thank you for watching.